I'm going to take you through this 36 by 24 oil on panel featuring a wolf coming across a snow-covered landscape at night under the stars and aurora borealis. So it is June 18th, believe it or not, and it's about 35, 36 degrees right now. We got 4 to 5 inches of snow last night, and it's supposed to get down to about mid to low 20s tonight, and it's been spitting snow all afternoon since I got here. I'm not super excited about it, I'll be honest. I was kind of ready to move on from winter and get into those summer feelings, but I told myself when I started this that I would stick with it. So here we are, even though and maybe I don't really want to be here, but no, in all seriousness, it's going to be a fantastic evening. It's about a half hour before sunset, and I think it's going to be even a better morning. This is one of those ideal conditions. The storm has just kind of moved on. Everything's starting to clear up, and it's going to be just perfectly still. So I'm going to set up and hopefully put together a nice painting in the morning, and I'll share that at the end of the video. So stick around. Now, right now, I'm going to finish building this fire, and then we will review this week's newest painting. So with this particular painting, I want to focus on the backstory, and I'll walk you through the journey that led to this composition and theme. So with that, let's get the painting started. When composing this piece, I drew from several experiences. Beginning with the sky, this story begins many years ago. The aurora was something I first witnessed when I was a student in North Dakota. These few experiences were a bit underwhelming, but to see the subtle hints of color in the night skies inspired many ideas. Fast forward a few years, and I found myself living in central Montana. While exploring the northern part of the state was when I had my first true experience with the Northern Lights. At the time, my best means of camping was to sleep in the bed of my pickup truck. I found an old, worn-out road which dead-ended on a piece of public ground, miles from any artificial light and overlooking the vast, broken prairie. I climbed into my sleeping bag that night and drifted off to the sounds of the crickets. At around 3 a.m., after tossing and turning a bit, I awoke and decided to step outside for a bathroom break. I'll never forget standing there, still heavy-eyed and in a daze, and realizing what was happening off to my side. I thought something seemed weird or different, and upon turning my head, I froze up in amazement. Greens, yellows, pinks, and blues danced vigorously along the northern horizon. I felt the hair stand up on the back of my neck. The lights began to intensify, and soon they began to shoot up, almost directly above me. All things in life seemed suddenly so small in that moment. This was one of those times that grounded me and my perspective of our existence. When it came time to put together this scene, I wanted to draw from those emotions and that experience. I found commonalities with this and my relationship with wolves, and thought this was a great starting point for this story to incorporate the Northern Lights. Wolves are interesting to me and continue to fascinate my imagination. I've attempted to capture this in a past painting or two, but I don't think I had hit on exactly what I was trying to convey. I grew up hearing the distant howls in northern Minnesota. In recent years, as I've spent more time in the western backcountry, my encounters with them began to grow. The first time I had ever seen a wolf out here, it was in broad daylight. Hiking out from an overnight trip, we cut down through a large, expansive meadow. In the middle was a small draw that dipped down along some springs. We walked up to the low area, being able to see everything around us, and decided to drop in and follow it down. Upon reaching the bottom, I turned to take a look behind, and to my surprise, a large wolf, at maybe 100 yards, was trotting away from us, looking back as well. Was it watching us from above as we walked by? We just came into the draw, and I could see a quarter mile all around us just minutes before. Was it laying down in the tall grass this whole time? I was left clueless. A couple years later, in late winter, I found myself skiing up to the top of a lone, forest-covered mountain. The plan was to set up the composition for a painting, camp overnight, and finish the piece in the early hours of the morning. I got to my spot several hours before sunset. There was a small flat at the top where I was. Half was open and half on the backside was tall, dark timber. The landscape was buried in 3 feet of hard snow, and spring was knocking at the door. A day prior, we had a light dusting of snow, so it was easy to identify fresh tracks. The ground was covered in wolf prints, which was not uncommon, but I suppose looking back, there were certainly more than I had seen before. At one point during my ski-in, I crossed what looked like 14 sets of tracks, all traveling together in a group. What I didn't piece together was that these were likely from the same wolves who left the tracks around where I was planning to camp. I spent a couple hours making a ton of noise gathering firewood and preparing for the night. It was April 10th. I set up the composition on my panel, ready for morning, when the sun began to set. The light faded, and I now had about 30 minutes before dark when a long, deep howl rang out. I was confused at first because it was coming from maybe no more than, again, 100 yards from within the timber, in the exact direction from where I was gathering wood. Then it howled again, and I realized this was a wolf, and a very close one. I didn't understand, as nothing could be mistaken on whether I was there. I made sure of that with the amount of noise that I made. Sounds travel much less in thick timber, and when something is close, you can feel the depth in the sounds. As the wolf then began to bark, I could feel how close it was, and I realized it was projecting its barking at me. My wind was blowing right to it, so I knew it fully understood what I was. Do I stay? I didn't know. The barking continued. After about 10 minutes had passed, it kept barking at me periodically. As I stood there in ski boots, looking at wolf tracks all over the ground, I thought to myself, this animal is telling me to leave. You could almost sense the frustration in the barks, moaning and growling in between. I've never abandoned camp before like this, but I had no tent, and was I really going to insist on staying at this point? I packed up my bag and jumped on my skis within minutes of daylight left. I rode off the top, and after I got down to the edge before dropping down the steep hillside, which was just out of view from my campfire, I came across 7 sets of tracks. I follow my ski tracks when I head out of places like this, and these wolf prints were not there on my way in. I was sure of that. As I investigated, you could see they came from the direction of the wolf that was barking, sniffed my ski track up and down, and then circled around me. I never saw a single one, but the tracks were just 150 yards from my campsite from the other direction. In this region, wolves drop their pups by about mid-April, and I wonder still to this day, had I found a den by accident and tried to camp next to it? I'm still not sure if there are any other explanations. So these are just a couple of what has become a number of encounters now. These animals continue to confuse me, but I'm sure that from their end, there is no confusion. Like the auroras in the sky, my relationship with these animals has become like a silent dance of back and forth. The feeling I get during encounters like this make me feel the same way as I did on that night beneath the northern lights. And I think if I were to sum up this painting, I'd liken it to those emotions. This is why I'm titling this piece, The Silent Dance. Okay, we got this sage bush holding up my paint box, and we're going to look off to the east there. Some nice layers.
Alright, there